forum. First item, we'll just go over the minutes. The ones that we have in front of us were amended. The ones on record, they don't. The one we have in front of us don't reflect the amendments, but they are ones that are being recorded by the clerk. So, does anyone else have any comments to the minutes other than what's been submitted so far? No, minutes are good. It's accepted. Next meeting is the 11th on Monday. Sorry they're so close together. Hopefully we can just go over more of the code revisions on Monday. We don't have any applications at this time, so that'll be good. There are a couple of agenda items Monday. Probably fees will be about the only other item that we'll talk about.
The dock fees.
Yeah, Al had a whole list of stuff that we want to go over. Mark, good, Mark's here now. All right, no other correspondence or anything, so let's get right into the chapter 53 revisions that we put together. So making these revisions gets a little bit like multi-level chess, because each change might impact another section of this chapter or another chapter. So a lot of cross-referencing has to be done. And over the years, there's been numerous amendments and additions to the original code. So that has made for a number of redundancies, unclear sections and sections contrary to one another. So the first couple of passes that we make on this are to clean that stuff up and hopefully not create more issues as we move on. Let's see. So there's quite a bit. Hopefully we're going to cover all these changes tonight. If we get held up on any one particular section, I might just cut it off and move on, and then see if we have time at the end to go back to it. And
I was going to actually ask, it's a certain section I saw that we might need work. We can readdress later so we can keep the ball rolling.
Yep. I tried to get every one of your comments.
Yeah, I know you did. Yeah, there was just a couple of tricky things that I honestly don't even know what to do to solve it. It's just something to discuss later. And as that comes up,
Okay. We'll go through it as it presents itself on the.
Yeah, okay.
There are a couple items. I just was going over this again last night, and there's a couple items already that I would change from this draft, and I'll just point them out as we go through it. So.
Do you want to point out that this is a subset of what I've been working with? It's not the full package of changes, right?
Yeah, the only reason why we laid these out at this time is to get a start. There are we've revised virtually almost every section to some extent, but these we put together because they relate to one another. And then the next section, the next set will do the same way. So anyway, starting at the top. So with the table of contents, all I did was move penalties from the end of the chapter up to enforcement, just because it seemed logical. Permit issuance terms and responsibilities. I think Al had just pointed out how the responsibilities section had an entire paragraph that reiterated what was in the permit issuance terms. There were other paragraphs that also were duplicative, so I just combined them together. And let's see what else on this. The limitations on water control devices, just change it to water-related structures, because as you read through it, they're really not all control devices. And so penalties, I just I'm putting this out there as really to establish penalties that are, well, number one, reflect the increased fees, whatever they might end up being, and also to make them punitive so that they don't just become a cost of doing business with the permit. Yeah, I mean, they were
permit,
they were so low, they were below the permit fees at this point. So I don't know if anyone had any thoughts about the concept I use as far as a multiple, permit related fees versus other types of, permit related offenses versus other types of offenses. Just ramping it up as the original code did. You do it a second offense, obviously you're going to pay more. Third offense, pay more. One item I had put in here as a question, and I have this inserted in various places, both Matt and I sort of posed questions as we went through this for us to discuss. And here I added under D, 53-5D, the ability to terminate a contractor or agent's right or license to do business on Shelter Island. That concept was basically suggested to me by the building department when we realized that a certain contractor was, for a second time, doing major work, putting in a bulkhead without any permit, or not having made any application. I don't, this isn't something that I think we can pass on. This would just be for the town board to consider and the town attorney.
Well, it's a contractor review board.
Do we actually have a contractor?
Well, they don't do anything though.
But
They're.
I'm on the contractor review
but-
board. Careful, Gene.
Well, they haven't done anything, they're not just in the marine
4
venue.
years I was on the board previously, I had one complaint to deal
I
with.
mean, in the,
But something like this, if the WMAC made a recommendation, it would go to the contractor review board
Okay.
and be involved in, the process.
So,
Would you have a basis to sort of make that recommendation, or is it sort of like just coming up, oh, we think this person?
no, I mean, we're not gonna hurt people to recommend that somebody goes to the board. I mean, it has to be like
Oh, but if you had an issue, that's all.
if we had an issue with some, as a board, yeah, I suppose, but I think it's more of the client or the town itself having an issue.
Typically, it's a client or a contractor that has.
I mean, and it should be like, not just the marine venue, but, all contractors, whether it be landscape or building or whatever.
so does that,
Yeah.
That's what it is now.
It is, but it doesn't, it needs to have more enforcement, I guess, or push.
Does it have teeth now? I mean, there's just a board.
The review board only meets for the complaint, right?
so
Either the contractor or an owner.
So this
And
is,
I'm aware that I was involved in, there was nothing, just the owner brought a complaint against the contractor.
well, this would be, I was thinking of it in terms of the WMAC or the building department bringing the complaint against a contractor who was doing work without having gotten,
Probably
put in an
the
application and gotten
zoning
a permit.
department would be.
So is there that, do we have the ability to deal with does a town have the ability to impact a contractor's ability to do business?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So it was really just a question. I mean, it's not something
Yeah.
we're going to put in here. It's a thought I had that I wanted to find out if there is that recourse.
Because they're licensed to work on Shelter Island.
Yeah.
They have to have.
The license could be temporarily suspended, revoked, or
And
whatever.
depending on how many times they do something.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not something we would put in here. All we would put in here are the fines and just knowing that that's something available. Okay. So on this section or on the definitions, we'll get into each one, the substance of each one as we go through, but
I'm just pulling and I'm not a liaison to this committee, but since mentioned here, I'm not creating a forum, so I can talk. Just the contractor license review board, we don't have enough people, like currently it's Albert and I, we keep advertising, and we need like a home improvement contractor to fill like a third seat. But it's only for home improvement licenses. So do keep this in, or we need to rewrite the licensing
Right.
review board to pull in.
Oh, great.
It should be landscape contractors and, anybody doing
It should, yeah.
that
it
are
should be
licensed,
greater
because
than-
they're, and,
Yes.
I mean, the whole licensing concept should be maybe more refined about, you have, right now, there's just a license,
Yeah,
to,
and we need to look at this whole code section, because we can't seem to find somebody to join who's not currently in the business and therefore might create a conflict of
Conflict of
interest by being a working, contractor in the business and then
Great.
weighing in on his or her peers. So, so keep it in because it doesn't unfortunately fall under this.
like Don Dunning.
Perfect, thanks. That's good. Any other thoughts or comments about 53-5 penalties?
Yeah, Bill, I have one. Just if the fees were to stay the way they are, all right, the first fine would be, typically, right now, the way the fees are, to build a conventional 100-foot dock, the fees are somewhere between $4,500 and about $8,000, depending on how many pilings. So if under the first thing, if you were to triple that, now you're looking at the first fine being much more expensive than the second or third. So the point being, it's just really important we look at the fees and that the town act on changing the fees.
Would it be feasible to have the fines added directly to the fees, and so as the fees change, or is it too complicated maybe to sort of tie those together and just cure a clear violation and it's done?
Well, one is a multiple, one's fixed, I have both fixed dollar amounts. For a permit related penalty, it's a multiple, so that's easy.
Yeah.
For other types of offenses, it's a dollar amount. So if they built a dock without a permit, we're covered, because that would be a permit violation. If it's another type of violation under this code, then it's a fixed dollar amount.
Right. I was referring to where you had the multiple, a fine of not more than 3 times the sum of the permit. So that, like I said, it's kind of steep.
So D would have to
And
be
it's steeper
changed.
than a second or third offense. So I think that maybe, a set number might be more appropriate until we at least get the fees squared away, what they're going to be.
Got it.
Just a point.
No, it's a good point. Okay, so we definitely have to revisit once we confirm what the fee is going to be. Can always just leave the dollar amounts or the multiples blank until we get all the way down the end, and then put them in once fees are established,
Mhm.
which I have a feeling they already are. Okay, definitions. So let's see. The first one is commercial dock. So this sort of jumped out at me recently when we think about situations like what's happening at the Pridwin or what happened at Ram's Head. Ram's Head's a little different, but the way this currently reads, a dock utilized for commercial purposes under this chapter, such dock shall be located in B zone or be a part of an existing commercial boatyard / marina. So basically you could have a situation, since it's or, you could have a situation where you've got an established or an existing boatyard that isn't on the waterfront. And just look at boatyard. Definition of boatyard is they have to have a commercial facility. So the dock itself could become the commercial facility. So you could have, say in the Pridwin's case, where it's going to be a dock on a residential piece of property, because it doesn't have to be B zone, they could actually apply for a commercial dock if they set up a separate entity that is a commercial, that is a boatyard. So I could set up a corporation. Purpose of the corporation is boatyard. Set it up today. It's now existing. I then put in an application for a dock, say the dock down by the Pridwin they're talking about, or some other location where the dock isn't on B-zoned property. And I could be, under the way this is written, I could be eligible for a commercial dock, which throws us into, a 300-foot dock. And yeah, I think it can be simply addressed by either saying that a dock utilized for commercial purposes, period, under this chapter, such dock shall be located in B zone, period. Or you could take the or out in this paragraph, in the sentence, and say and. So it must be located in B zone and be a part of an existing commercial boatyard.
You go back to the whole, maybe we should amend what a commercial dock could be. How like maybe 300 feet long. I don't see any other docks being built, that aren't already in existence. So I would just maybe change that whole commercial thing to something that more reasonable. 300 feet is a pretty big dock. So I think we need to think about that, but I think we also need to think about entities such as marinas and whatever, and specifically hotels on the water that are in existence, that, a dock is part and parcel to what they would need to be, to operate if they have a good chunk of waterfront. That you need to address what the elephant in the room is, that maybe it's not a commercial dock, but change it so that you recognize that these facilities, should be able to have some sort of dock and repair the docks and whatever else.
So that anticipates other hotels being built on the water that would want docks?
No, I don't think so, but I don't know of any more that would be.
So if they're existing, then it's really not an issue.
Right.
If the dock's already there.
Perhaps not, but I think we should, also try to change the code as far as what a commercial dock is going forward.
Design criteria for.
Yeah, so that you don't have the possibility of a gigantic dock somewhere, that.
It's not just the structure, it's also then the use. So, I'm thinking of it in terms of.
So maybe there's no more, like going forward, there's no docks, commercial docks, unless you're in a B zone piece of property.
That's basically what
Right.
That's what I'm trying to make this say.
Right.
So you've either got to be in B zone, and you've got to be a boatyard or a marina. You're saying you might want to expand that to not just boatyards and marinas, but to hotels. And that would, so if Jack's turned into a hotel, boutique hotel, then
They already
have a dock. I
They have a
don't think there's too many,
there's not that many places
left where you
that you could do that, and maybe it's a moot point, but I think somehow if it wasn't, you should make the commercial dock criteria more reasonable, it's something, if somehow there wasn't a commercial dock allowed, that it couldn't be as big as the code now says.
What is a hybrid dock?
we don't have a hybrid dock.
What is it? Is it?
There was a lot of talk last year about hybrid dock. I don't
Well,
know
yeah,
what is that.
there's no definition for it, but it's basically a dock that was on residential property that was owned by a commercial entity. So, and that's what I'm trying to address here, is that we don't have that situation and we don't run into that
I'm
again.
not quizzing you.
Yeah, no, I'm
asking
just,
going forward, what, we've introduced, that's been introduced now, this hybrid doctor.
Well, I don't think that's a term that you
Yeah.
should allow. I mean, it should, you shouldn't even have a definition. It shouldn't even be in the
we
code.
don't want to get involved in the hybrid dock business.
I know that.
Right. And somebody just came up with a name, I think.
Sunset Beach is talking about like a hybrid commercial dock.
Well,
Or
that's,
something, or I've seen that written something, that's all.
yeah, well, that's why I'm trying to tighten this up. I think if we nail it, if we at least address this as, it's got to be B zone, and it's got to be a commercial boatyard / marina, it restricts it quite a bit from what it is right now. It would prevent someone from building a commercial dock on a piece of property that is not a business zone piece of property. So that if the Prydwen, for example, were to get this permit to build on this residential or other than B zone piece of property, they could not build a commercial dock there. It would be restricted to a 100-foot dock or whatever, we come up with on outside waters in that area.
Yeah, Mr. Where are they trying to build it?
And what's been talked about is right now they've got an easement right in the middle of the beach, and they're talking about moving it down. As far as I mean, this might have changed.
This is the Prydwen or Sunset Beach?
I'm sorry, I keep saying the Prydwen.
That's why I'm getting confused.
I apologize. It's the Sunset.
Right.
Sunset. They're trying to build it all the way down at the end.
If you go back, I'm not trying to I don't want to get in that discussion right now, but going back into the deeds and everything, it seems.
What exactly was written in the deed?
Yeah, I mean, to go way back, the Heights somehow was involved in it, and,
Well, I mean,
there's a lot of stuff that should be looked at before you decide.
Well, they've submitted it they've done a title search. And that, from my experience with title searches, would flesh out, whether this is a good.
Presumably, they'll look at all the deeds that I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, they would go all the way back and they would look from the time it was granted, and it runs with the land. So it goes from owner. So it's a covenant that is apparently a good covenant. So
The title search has come back, do we know?
so I'm told, yeah, I haven't seen it, but that's what Stephen said. So, well, that's my recommendation anyway, that we throw it in there as and.
I think so.
It just, if we do the change, it's sort of like as the, adding in the, and be part of the existing commercial boatyard marina. We don't have marina, I don't define, I think. And the question then is, we have boatyard defined. Is boatyard actually used anywhere in the code? I didn't check. I'm just asking.
It is, because I searched boatyard, but I didn't search marina. But marina is in the mooring code then, because I know it's in one of them. But not that I want, chapter, I don't want one chapter to jump over into the other chapter.
Boatyard could be landlocked.
Right. Yeah, that was the point.
Wait a minute,
Just if we need it, or if would it actually be more, we're talking about the dock code. We actually talked about a marina. And then do we want to sort of
Maybe
revise
take boatyard out.
and make that marina and then define, marina with the way we want it to be?
yeah, this is interesting, because boatyard and marina are both defined slightly differently in the mooring code. And they are required to be on the waterfront, which is a bit of a problem with the mooring code, but I don't want to get into that now.
Maybe to change boatyard from marina and define what marina is, boatyard could be either or.
Right.
But, a marina could be a boatyard.
Boatyard
A boatyard.
can't be in a marina. Marina would be
Oh,
base, wouldn't it? Waterfront.
On waterfront. I think of it as waterfront.
So if you just say it has to be a marina, then that's defined as something with a waterfront presence. Or a boatyard
There's not.
could be either, you know?
Anywhere, boatyard could be anywhere,
Yeah, and this definition of boatyard does not include storage. Oh, it does have storage. There it is. Okay. So it does include storage, which is basically similar to a marina. All right. Let me just take that.
Shelter island boat.
Shelter island boats is that comes to mind, right?
That would constitute a boatyard.
So we're basically saying it should be marina, not boatyard.
I think so.
I'll play with it because look at chapter 90. So I'd like a lot of these definitions in 90 and 53 to be similar. Commercial vessel, just added in documented or registered. Dock really just moved, definition of dock just really moved it around a little bit. It's the only thing added to that is boardwalks and other means of access. And that came up as a result of dealing with wetlands issues. So that we have some say over what happens at the part of the dock that extends beyond landward of mean high water. Not that, it gives us the opportunity to say that there should be a wetlands permit. Right now, the wetlands code kind of turns that right around and says, well, we say there isn't one required, but I think the wetlands code is going to be, well, I know it needs to be revised, hopefully will be, or replaced. And then just added on here that the tax lot number will be included for the upland property. And as I'm running through this, anybody, if you have any suggestions or comments or anything, I'm just shout it out. Dock inspector, building inspector, or other authorized individual. I don't think we should just say harbor master, but I think anyone who's authorized to do the dock inspections, I think, should be listed here in case somebody else is at some point.
They probably need some sort of qualification to inspect the dock. A harbor master may not, have that, and I don't know, I don't know how much the building department has.
My thought was the town should probably at this point in time actually get a professional dock inspector that works perhaps under the building department or something like that, but actually have someone who is up to date on the codes and all the different aspects of building docks, so that we actually had a person, because right now the building department is overwhelmed. They don't have time to do dock inspections. And over the course of my life working the bays, there are numerous situations where a dock inspector would come in and say, hey, you're not maintaining your structure. And it's saying, the building department is so overwhelmed, they never get around to checking out a dock. Whereas a dock inspector that was assigned to inspect just the docks and other waterfront structures, obviously bulkheads and stuff like that, that would be, I think that might be a good idea.
So why don't we say,
Be the code enforcement officer.
well, that's why I want to make it as broad as possible, because we don't know who's going to fill that slot, whether it's going to be a building inspector or some other, when we say qualified, authorized individual. Does that work?
We want to try not to make a new position. So,
What?
we want to make a new position.
No, we don't, the guys in the building department are capable of reading the code, and they can read plans, so they can walk down. I think they can figure it out. So here's where it gets a little trickier. And these additional definitions were put in here to address the unique situation in this code where we're dealing with privately owned docks as well as town-owned docks. So the definition of resident, I changed and added domiciliary. Because resident, basically, all you had to do is own real estate. So my thinking, at least, is that for these finite resources that the town owns, where you've got lists of people who want access to those resources, like slips at the town dock, and that basically the first people on who should be permitted to have access to that, be eligible for it, would be people who live here. You can own real estate and not live here. As far as the definition of domiciliary goes, which is this is your primary, excuse me, this is your primary residence, this is where you spend most of your time. Other towns determine that by looking at where people have their driver's licenses, what address they have on their driver's license, where they vote. Someone who's spending 183 days in Florida and pays their taxes there instead of New York, probably not a resident of Shelter Island. So that's the thinking behind that. And that's, a change in policy, really.
And is that designed, if you're not a domiciliary, you can't build a dock? Is that what we're saying?
No. This is strictly to deal with the town-owned docks.
Okay, just,
As far as building a dock, you own real estate. You can build a dock. The one thing I've added, and that's in response to what a few people have suggested, is that you're here for a year before you go to build the dock. When you think it through, and you'll see how I jumped to resident right now.
it sort of does that.
Person or entity who has owned real property located in the town of Shelter Island, which has been owned and developed. Now, I put that in for a couple of reasons. One, because you could own, the concept is you want the person to be on that site, living at that site, dealing with the water at that site, understanding what they're looking at before they decide to build a dock. So, but if they own a piece of land on Shelter Island, they live on the other side of the island, or they live inland, they're not there. It could be a vacant piece of property at this point, and they could build a dock there without having been there for a year and experienced it. So that's why I added in here, owned and developed for a period of not less than 1 year before the application is made. In another part of the code, I had specifically added, this is under 53(9)E that we're not looking at yet tonight. It specifically stated that, the applicant will have, lived on Shelter Island at that location for a year. But
I don't know, I mean, maybe developed. I'm not sure that would have affected you, right?
yeah, it would have. And that's, so the bench.
Mark has his hand up there.
Bill,
Yeah.
Bill, what you're saying makes sense in certain instances and is a total moot point in others, perhaps. If you're looking at inside waters where you have 4 neighbors on one side with a dock and 4 neighbors on the other side with a dock, the year you're spending, you're not going to learn a lot. If you're out in the heights facing Greenport off of the bluff, there's a lot to be seen. So maybe you want to define it more on outside waters, rather than waylaying somebody for a year on a clear inside water, safe place, commonly used, for 100 years. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, exposure is, just one element, and that really is the outside waters element. On inside waters, you could have, I mean, if they were there for a year and they had a mooring and they decided that that sufficed, they could go, use their dinghy to get out there. And they decided it wasn't worth the money or the time or the effort or whatever. It seems like it might not be a bad requirement, but I understand what you're saying.
In that scenario, though, you could have like 3 docks on each side of you, which don't have enough water to do anything, so.
Yeah, that's true. I
You'd
mean,
be given the year to figure that out.
I think it probably should be universal too, not this property versus that property.
I mean, if it gets too crazy to try to distinguish.
well, the whole outside waters and inside waters thing is, I haven't figured out whether that is going to be necessary yet or not. I don't know if,
I think it'd be better just to have it as a requirement on Shelter Island and, so then you don't have to yet deal with that. I mean, I'm not saying you would ever have to deal with it, but maybe.
Yeah.
I'm still having a problem with
The
develop,
process-
though.
The process in getting a permit typically will take at least a year anyway, so if they wanted to take it, if it's pretty obvious that they're in a place where they're probably gonna get it, and they could start moving ahead with the DEC and all that stuff. Whereas if there's a question, at least you're sure that they'll probably hold off in spending that money.
okay.
Just a thought.
So are you saying you're okay with the idea, the 1 year concept?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
So you could order a piece of property that you don't have any intention of building a house on, but you do want to build a dock. But if you don't, according to the way this is written, if you don't develop it, then you couldn't build a dock.
So that's a whole leap from where we are now. And it was just incorporating that idea that came to me from an anonymous
I mean,
source.
you could extend what the building code is. I mean, it's like an accessory construction without benefit of a primary residence. I mean, that is a concept that is in other parts of the code, the building code specifically, but I'm not saying I like it or not, but it sort of would be the continuity of it. You can't build like a garage on your little piece of property without the benefit of a house.
Right. And I didn't think dock was included under accessories, but it was pointed out to me that it is an accessory.
So, I mean, if you extend the definition like that, then you might have an issue. I don't know that I agree with it. I think somebody who wanted to have a piece of property that they have another house somewhere else and they wanted to put a dock in. I'm not talking about anybody in particular.
I mean, I'm bringing it up, even though
I know that. That's why it just, I mean,
I can't.
what's I guess my question is, what's the problem with that? I mean, if they wait the year and they see so that's why I would maybe take developed out of that. Unless the thought is to extend, make the code really uniform, and that's an accessory, and you can't have an accessory without a house, primary residence. I don't know.
I have a hard time
Oh.
arguing against you, but does anyone, I mean, do you understand what we're?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that was, docks as an accessory, and you should have a house on the lot before you have a garage or a dock or a drive, that sort of thing, I believe that, yes.
Used to be a lot of people, especially on the lagoon, had it
Yeah, there's a few.
still
I mean,
with that. Up in Silver Beach.
Silver Beach was,
Yeah.
I mean, there may be other places too.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's the one that comes to mind.
Certainly there are places, where I guess there's docks and there's, the property's divided, by a road.
Silver
So there are two different pieces of property, tax map wise,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
like on Winthrop Road, for instance.
Silver Beach, there's a couple
Silver
of
Beach is one
that
also.
have the street, and then they got a parcel with a dock on it. Yeah.
So you may want, this, you might get into,
There's one on the causeway too.
yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
so,
I never really had a problem with it. But it
I mean,
is,
I
it's
kind of,
questionable. But it is a good question, you know what I mean? And that's probably maybe something that should be dealt with by the building department, not us.
so the question is whether we leave it in the draft or, and it works its way, to the town board and they kick it around, or we take it out of the draft. So I will put a question mark next to it, and maybe carry that on.
I think I would vote to take developed out if we were voting on that, but
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Let others deal with it.
Matt?
We have enough to deal with.
if the intent is to to get fewer docks, then you want to treat it as an accessory.
I would always consider it as an accessory, but then, once again, it's already happened in places where
Yeah, I mean,
there's no building on the lot, so. I don't know, it's kind of cool. So,
I'm not gonna vote on this myself.
Clearly, there are places where it's already the case, sort of like, we have sort of pre-existing situation. I guess my question is going forward.
Well, that's it, it's going forward, because everything else is pre-existing and gonna be non-conforming, whatever, right? So,
Yeah, I guess I would tend to leave it as developed. But
Well, I mean,
for me,
all
the
you
most
need to
important-
do is call it an accessory structure, and that takes care of the problem.
Right, because I guess that's what I've been thinking about.
I mean, then you can't build it until you have a house.
I believe,
I mean, I think I really like the year delay aspect of understanding what the situation is. I mean, whether
Yeah,
that's a
that's
year, whatever,
definitely-
I think that's me, you understand the situation. To me, that's the core. It's like, you're not going in willy-nilly, just putting it in on spec.
Right.
And that's I mean, that's the core.
Sort of what happened on Silver Beach.
But
um,
of course, they actually, the situations they've been.
Mark, you have any thoughts on the developed, non-developed?
It becomes very tricky because there are some small pieces of land which could be purchased and a dock could be built on, but nowhere near big enough to build a house or any other structure. I could think of, there are 3 on the causeways now that are there. One is Bergsman, which is the first dock on Little Ram. When you're coming up on the right-hand side, his house is on the left-hand side, and the piece is there. And then there is the one from the doctor that's in the middle of the causeway. And there are some other pieces of property there that are privately owned next to Chiamonte. It's Dr. Chiamonte's dock.
All right, that's one I know about, yeah.
Yeah, there are some other pieces of property there that in theory could be purchased by somebody and somebody could build a dock there. And
They have the
over on-
necessary setbacks and everything else, you think? I mean,
all they
under-
need is 54 feet.
yeah,
And if they don't have 54 feet, there are several of them. You could buy the neighbors, the adjacent one.
right. So does that make you more in favor of requiring developed or against requiring developed?
I would be in favor of being developed rather than these things popping up out of nowhere all over the place, because then you might have an issue parking. Like, Chiamonte is lucky. He has a deep piece of property, but but he's also, I don't know how he got the permit to fill it in to put parking over there. I doubt if it went through the DEC. It was probably done a long time ago, but there'd be others where it would be pretty compromised parking or place to pull a car over on the side of the road.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like we leave it in at this point and see if it gets kicked out down the road. Riparian rights, it really doesn't change, what was
No.
added.
Oh, Al?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I go back to the domiciliary for a minute?
Yeah.
I know that you wanted to put that in there and I think that's a major shift or a major change. If we're gonna say that you're not gonna allow a taxpayer to utilize, the town docks. And that, I don't think that would be received too well by the community that are paying taxes and then not being able to benefit from the things that are offered here. And in addition, the people that may have been on the waiting list for half a generation would then all of a sudden be excluded from a town facility. I just don't, I think that's, we're kind of blowing by it, but I don't think that would be accepted by the community.
Reasonable point.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of limited resources and, if you had a place in another state where you went and spent part of your year, would you expect to have the same access to limited resources there? Especially
Well,
if you,
yes, if you're paying, taxes on the real estate that you have here, and you're here, you live here for 3 months of the year in the summer. I mean, really, for the most part, the docks get used, it's June, July, and August. And there's the opportunity for you to not use it for the rest of the season and for other people to use it, if that's the case. And if you've been on the waiting list and you've been, even paying for the waiting list or anticipate that you would like to someday be able to do that, I think that's a bit of pill for taxpayers to swallow. Yes, and the resources are limited, absolutely, but I think everybody deserves a fair shot at it. I think most of us on this committee are here most of the time now, but probably most of us weren't for some part of our lives.
okay, well, it's a way to approach situations like this. And yeah, I think there'll be differences of opinion. It's just a matter of whether, there's always differences of opinion. It's just a matter of what the majority feels. And it's, not, does anyone else have thoughts about it? Whether it makes sense or it's.
Well, I think I agree with Al's point of view. I mean, I think that everybody's paying the same freight, and you could argue that the people who are not here all the time are sort of paying extra because they're not really using the resources of Shelter Island, for a full year, where other people might be here all the time and putting more of a burden on the water or, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think you probably should treat everybody equally if they're taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a property taxpayer, then you should be granted the same access as someone who is domiciled.
What about the natural person aspect of things? I mean, versus a corporate, I mean, you could take if you've got a piece of some corporation, you're a taxpaying in that sense through the corporation. You could split that up into a lot of different pieces of pie and be.
Well, I mean,
It's still one.
I think you have to have a principle, I think we were asking like for LLCs and stuff to know who the principal is, and not everybody who might have a little chunk of the thing should have the same rights as the principal person. I mean, there has to be a principal name for everything, right? Isn't that what we've been saying?
That's what we're driving at. You gotta identify who the beneficial owner is of the entity that.
New York State has done it already.
Yeah.
Right?
Federal government's done it.
Maybe that's federal law. Yeah.
It's federal law, but it's become rather universal. It's what other towns are doing, requiring residency in order to have access to certain limited resources. I think of it in terms of both the town dock and moorings. You know, there's more than just paying taxes. There's being here and being part of the community, doing things like we're doing right now that make someone more embedded in the area, and they should be able to benefit from what's available. It's
I'd be interested to see what the waiting list is for Daniel Lord or for Concrete and see who's on
I
it.
know I waited 20 years, 3 people.
I think it's probably mostly people who live here, I would think. I don't know that. I'm just saying that. I don't know.
might be worthwhile to look at the waiting list.
You know, because maybe it's like things that, you know, like having docks for hotels, that's not going to be a question really. You know, like.
Yeah, that's true. It might be a non-issue.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the bulkhead at Condon Creek, who's paying for it? It's the taxpayers for the most part.
Yeah, the taxpayers pay for a lot of things that they don't use. I mean, I've never put anybody through school and I'm paying all the school taxes. But,
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that.
You would have every right to send your kid to school here.
Mhm.
You know, and it wouldn't be like, you wouldn't be made to wait or anything. You certainly could. It's your choice that you decided not to.
Right, you wouldn't be excluded.
So, again, Matt, do you have a feeling about it? Go around the room and see what.
I thought it was a good idea. You know, I guess who it actually impacts on that, you know, looking at the list might be helpful, I think. Not,
I don't think looking at the list makes any difference. You know, it's a matter of you know, what's ethically, you know, you shouldn't make your opinion dependent on the personalities. My point is, a big part of my point is we need to be objective when we're dealing with stuff like this. You
It is
can't.
objective. It's not that it's not
Okay.
objective. It's just, it's not that it's not objective. It's just.
Well, if you're looking at the personalities and saying, I want to look.
I'm not looking at anyone's
personality.
personality. It's not a personality issue. It's a matter of where you live. That's not part of your personality.
Well, it takes the objectivity out of it.
Yeah, but you know, there's a lot of subjectivity in what we're talking about. Oh, you're saying, oh, the people who are sitting here, you know, we should all get slips of concrete then.
Right.
But, I think that's a hard thing to measure, you know, and I think the person who lives here, you know, maybe he lived here longer, you know, and he decided to go to Florida for now more than half the year. You know, maybe that's a change, but, you know, I mean, I don't know that we should try to regulate those people differently than somebody who happens to not go to Florida.
I mean, is there a different way to sort of allocate that scarce resource than time on the waiting list? I mean, it's sort of like, should we figure out an alternative strategy for allocation? I mean,
I wouldn't mess with the waiting list.
I mean, you know, that's what it's like. So that's one way of allocating scarce resource. Here, it's like, okay, well, it's limiting who can actually, you know, who is eligible for it. I mean, sort of, we're selecting a path for how you allocate that resource. In this case, right now, it's
Open to anyone.
open to anyone, but you've got to wait. And
I mean, you're not, that's gonna, even if you change it, it's still gonna be the same. You still have to wait. You know, I mean, it probably, my only point is, I'm not trying to say, oh, well, if the list, you know, is all islanders, then we don't have to, you know, it is sort of a moot point, but I think that, you know, what's the difference? I mean, you know, even if you made it all people who live on the Shelter Island, I think the same thing, it wouldn't change anything. I mean, there'd still be this list that you have to, you know, go to the grave before you lose your spot. I mean, this is not one of these giant things that are broken that need to be fixed, I think. That's my thought.
I think it's actually a bigger issue with moorings than it is with the town dock. But, so,
Not wedded to it. I guess. I mean, I thought it was a good idea. I guess
Obviously, because you guys put it in there, but I mean, I think, you know, that's why we're doing what we're doing. Is
yeah, no, I'm just trying to go around. So you have
Well, on one hand, yeah, your taxpayers should have equal access to town facilities like that. But on the other hand, though, I don't know whether domiciliary is. I don't know whether, I mean, domiciliary and taxpayer, I could see having access to that facility. I don't know, like a domiciliary having access to that facility would deny a taxpayer access to that facility. I don't really think that's right if you're paying taxes.
well, it's one of the few places that domiciliary is used in the entire town code is for shellfish licenses.
Yeah.
That's about the only other place it's used. So that you have to actually be someone who lives here.
Domicile. Yeah.
And
Well,
that's new.
for-
That's
for-
new.
That's new for the commercial license.
Right.
The resident recreational license is taxpayer or
Right.
domiciliary for, yeah, the commercial
You
license
can-
is the domiciliary one, yes.
Okay.
And that was the newly created license.
And Mark, you got any input on this?
As a voice from far away right now, I am in favor of it for people who domicile on the island.
So basically, so you guys, and you're basically
It kind of,
Which brings up, when are we gonna get another member?
at their, yeah, they have interviews.
We wouldn't, you know, you're counting up where we are. And it's
just drew,
Yeah, we're basically.
drew a
Just
line,
for-
didn't we?
just for the sort of this year, I think having the definition in, I think is probably
the definition, I don't have any problem with the
how it
definition.
gets applied later on. So I mean, for this specific issue right here, I would say we should leave it here. Have the definition. I think having the definition in is useful. How we apply it later on, if it's actually made use of.
That's fine. I mean, I don't
I
have
think
any
we-
problem with
you know,
That
that.
brings up an excellent point, yeah.
Well, it's applied in the sections we're gonna get to in a minute,
Well, then maybe we're gonna change those.
right? So we're basically 3 out of 3 on this, but let's see how we go here. Dredging, just added that, just because it wasn't in here before.
Before we move along, I'd like to just bring up something, hate to slow the momentum down. But
We have none.
a question with docks
Almost made it to.
and accessories to said structure,
Where are you?
boardwalk ramps, wasn't that an issue at Ram's Head?
That's why I think he added that in there, yeah.
Isn't it, then it's really a wetlands application, a boardwalk or a catwalk?
It's where the property runs into, so the land.
That's what I'm just asking, because I know it was an issue, that's all, or something.
It was because the upland, mean high water going inland, runs into regulated, I believe it's 75 feet of regulated land for wetlands purposes. And it was a question of whether, in that case, it was a setback issue, actually. But it's also becomes an issue of how much disturbance you can create in the wetland.
No, but that wasn't in the purview of the dock. The dock was a separate issue from the access to the dock. because the access was over wetlands.
And we purposely disconnected it. Well, all we did was approve the dock from mean high water seaward because we couldn't deal with, it was beyond our
I
purview to
think
do.
that was a unique case.
Here you're saying that you're allowing ramps and boardwalks to access the dock.
I'm just considering the access to the dock as part of
As part of the
Dock.
So when we look at a dock application, if there's access that runs from mean high water inland into property that might be regulated, then we could say you may need a wetlands permit. That's all.
Okay, all right, I got you.
Got it?
I mean, in the past, until recently, this really never came up. You know, the dock was approved and there was a ramp to get from wherever the property was to the dock, and nobody cared about it that much because it was only a specific swath of that they traversed to get to the actual dock. Otherwise, why would you build a dock that you can't get to?
Well, and it's going to be presented to us sooner than later because specifically along the heights, the bluffs, where we have docks that people have no access to from their home, and they have to cut through the wetlands to get there. So,
Right.
So dredging, then,
Bill, is
Yeah.
anywhere in our regulations, does it say that a home is limited to one dock?
I'm adding it. It does
Thank you.
not say that now,
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
and hopefully that won't get knocked down when we talk about that. So dredging, just define dredging, wasn't here before. Entity, because basically you've got a resident is a person, and a person includes every type of entity under the sun. So I've just broken it out so that this is basically to help get to the beneficial owner of an entity. They need to be broken out from person. So that's the reason for this. So entity, a body created by law as opposed to created by whatever you believe in, including but not limited to corporation, company, blah, blah, blah. And the beneficial owner of which must be identified in any application submitted to the town. Foreshore, mean low water and mean high water both added with the technical assistance of Matt. So there are, this is, you have to look this up. The National Tidal Datum Epoch. It's pretty interesting. It is determined every 19 years by NOAA. The most recent one goes from 2002 to 2020. Probably won't be distributed until 2026, but it is the technical way of determining where mean high water, mean low water are for a particular location. Let's see. Oh, owner. I reread this last night and I want to strike. I have in here the resident person or entity. It's just the resident out of it. It makes it too complicated. It draws a definition of resident into that. So just the person or our entity and whose name the dock is, the property where the dock is going to be located. And then I've defined person, a natural person, human being is distinguished from a person such as a corporate or other entity created by the operational law. Resident, we already talked about. Riparian rights, really no change in riparian rights, just defining it as a right. Upland's used throughout the code. It was never defined. When Matt and I read through this, and there were terms like water frontage, shoreline, upland, it just some of them meant the same thing. So basically just defined upland. That's the property from the mean high water mark going inland, upland of the mean high water mark. Water frontage was deleted basically because it's the same thing as shoreline. It's the same thing as mean high water. It's just another name for it, and it was only used in one place in the code, and I replaced it with mean high water instead of water frontage. And then, as I had mentioned, water control structures changed to water-related structures. And just basically just cleaned up the definition a little bit. No real substantive change in that. We get to 53.7. So just clarify, no person or entity. Since we changed the definition, you have to throw entity in there. The number 2A2, that was stricken just because that time period when they amended the code that was put in, it's no longer necessary. So just trying to clean that up, take that out. 4. So I should back up. This is dealing with town-owned docks. So this is the whole 53.7 is under town-owned docks, piers, and wharfs. So everything, the permits we're talking about here are for town-owned docks. And this is where domicile comes in. So if we are going to utilize that definition, this is where I had utilized it and where we may want to throw it out. So this is saying that applicants for a slip at the town-owned dock are required to be domiciles. So that basically that they are living here full-time. So I know we were, as far as the definition goes, it seemed like we were okay, but as far as this goes, I imagine we're back to the 3-3, where 3 say it's no good and 3 say it's
3 say resident, 3 say domicile.
right. So this would either go back to resident, basically definition being a person or entity who has, and that's going to have to be changed too, because you don't have to be, it's interesting. You don't have to own property in order to get a slip at one of the town-owned docks. You could just live here.
You'd be domiciled.
Well, all you'd have to do is own, well, no, you just apply, so basically it's.
No, can I just, what was, what.
Yeah, go back to the
states
original.
Now, what it states now is each applicant for a permit must provide the town clerk, I'm skipping a few words, proof of residency. Proof
Right.
of ownership of a boat, description of the boat, yada, yada, yada. So that it can't just be anybody. You have to be a resident. And we've always defined resident as a taxpayer. So
Well, no.
Well, I mean, it could be,
No, resident currently, resident is current. Let me finish. Resident is currently defined as all domiciliaries. Okay, it includes domiciliaries.
yes,
And it also states that, but they have to be here for a period of not less than 6 months before they make their application, and or property owners.
right. So that allowed somebody who's a renter.
You got
the option to apply for a dock or for the
Or
dock.
not,
And I don't know if you want to cut them out or not. That's, that's another story. But to cut out the taxpayers, I think is a big story.
No, I think if you're domiciled, even if you don't own property, if you're living here, that certainly, I mean, that's what I was trying to drive at before, whether you own property or not. If you live here full time, you should be entitled to these things. So basically, what we're saying is throw it back to the original definition. Do we want to leave it as 6 months? Do we want to make it a year?
I think then
domiciled and taxpayer, right?
Includes both domiciliaries and taxpayers.
But I think that 6 month period should probably go to a year, just like everything else is going to a year. But definitely as a taxpayer, I believe taxpayers and domiciles should be allowed access to these facilities if their name comes up on the list.
Bill, one of the things we were talking about, I think for a good bit, was whether we and the code needed to be involved with administering these sort of, sort of getting down into the granularity of these sort of administering these sort of resources. It's like, is this something that needs to be written into the code? And I think, was it Bo, I guess, was mentioning, going back and forth, I think about saying whether or not it's helpful to have, I think this was like the people tying up at the end of the dock. It's like helpful to be able to point to the code. At the same time, it's like, this is kind of a lot of weeds. If the resource changes, it's like, then you have to go and change the code. Or is it, if the town government can be like, hey, look, this is how we want to manage it now. And that wouldn't necessarily need to be in the code at all.
Well, those were, that was specifically with respect to time periods that might change, because we've got, where's that? I don't we get to it tonight. One place you can tie up for 10 minutes, one place you can tie up for an hour, one place you can, it's.
Where tie-ups, I believe, and then the 10-minute tie-up, I believe, is Daniel Lord Road. 2-hour tie-ups are at the rest of
Grace's Lanes.
Grace's Lane, Deering Harbor,
Right.
and Condon Creek. And
Well, if we keep moving through this, we'll get to it. What I'm hearing is that we would change resident back basically to what it was, change domiciliary to,
No, I mean, you could leave domiciliary
yeah, that's one.
in there but put taxpayer as well.
Yep.
I mean, the definition is fine. It just,
Okay, got it. Where are we? Okay. All right, so we're on 53(7)(a)(4). Back to resident. Now, the last sentence in this makes no sense. Matt and I could not figure it out. So 53(7)(a)(4).
the
7.
permittee must own the same boat
Oh, yeah.
at the time the permit is issued. No, okay. It's a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what does that mean? Any permittee must own the same boat at the time the permit is issued within 60 days thereafter.
And within, I guess, they have to own it for at least 60 days, and then they could change boats? Is that what it means?
If you change your boat, there's a whole paragraph, about what you have to do if you change your boat. So I mean, it's totally superfluous.
On the same boat at the time of the permit.
I think what the intent of that, and it's probably worded wrong, was that if you had a boat under contract that you could apply or be granted or whatever Because we've had that happen a number of times where the person didn't actually own the boat yet, but they had a contract to get the boat. And I think that was utilized a lot of time, probably more often in the mooring code than anywhere, but yeah, I mean, it's worded, it's very
I would,
weird.
I don't
Doesn't
think,
make- you're right.
I don't think we'd miss it if it was not, if it wasn't there.
Yeah.
I don't think it would matter.
Yeah.
Right,
I'm striking it out.
okay.
No one's gonna miss it. Okay, 5, initial, domiciled, okay, gotta change that again, domiciled. Proof of ownership. Okay, Tom, this is where I was taking a bunch of your suggestions and tightening this language up.
Which one we, on 5? Yeah,
Basically 4 and 5, it's where I could, and throughout the code, I would take the same language, because the code in many places says the same things in different ways. So tried to make all that language the same from one place to another. So so hopefully this, this was an attempt to address what you, specifically put in there what you were saying as far as the description of the boat, a photo of the boat, a current registration.
yeah, the current registration was big, because if you're applying for this slip and you don't have a current registration, you're putting an unregistered boat in a slip, and I don't think that could be
Right.
an option, that you have, the boat has to be registered. Yeah, properly. Currently, current registration,
Right?
Unless,
yeah.
I don't want to be like Peter Reese here, unless, no. Sail powered or oar powered, but you don't really have to register it, right?
Well, it's gotta be a minimum of 12 feet long to fit in a
Right.
slip, so if that requirement, anything over.
Right,
that-
but but you could have you could be easily over that.
A what?
It could be easily over that if it was manually or wind driven,
All vessels must be registered, sailboat or other.
even if they're not auxiliary powered.
If it plies the waters, it is required to be registered.
Yeah, it used to, you could used to be able to be just documented, but now you have to register a documented vessel.
Yeah, any vessel that would fit in a slip at a
Yeah.
town
A boat that
facility.
strictly sail has to be registered?
Yes,
So.
yes.
This is
Sunfish?
It was Peter Vielbeek who insisted
I was
on.
under the impression that a rowboat or a sailboat didn't have to be.
This is where I wish Bo was here, but I believe that the registration is a requirement of a certain size vessel. I believe.
It used to be, it had to be powered, but,
It used to be
Right.
powered, but I believe
Right.
now it's a size.
and it used to be documentation, that a documented boat didn't have to be registered, but
Correct,
yeah.
I
correct.
just jumped into that water myself.
All right, moving on.
I'm gonna pick your brain on that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd like to see exactly what's currently written in the code as to what's.
Not this code, another code.
Not this code, somebody else's.
Somebody else's.
But that sounds like something that Bo could answer.
I'm sure he could.
Yeah.
53.7, just added entity. 53.8 is gonna change that back to resident. Original language. I'm not gonna be able to read my handwriting tomorrow, I know it.
Just a quick Google search says New York State requires all power-driven vessels to register with the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles if they operate primarily in New York waters.
Okay,
Includes personal watercraft, but it does not say anything about in New York, boats, watercraft without a motor do not need to be registered.
so how did we end up going down this path, that we might have sailboats that go?
I'm just saying, it had to be registered. It said something about being registered to be in the slip.
Well, that'd be
Right.
Current registered, but if you just, I'm not saying, that's why I said Peter Reese. Forget it.
right?
If a hurricane and a tornado come at the same
Right.
time, and it's a full moon,
I just want Peter to know, if he's watching, that I took all of his comments and put them in here,
okay?
one way or another. Okay, so there's a few other spots where we're going to change domiciliary, original language.
So Bill, that was in it reference to number 5, where it said about a copy of the boat's current registration. Where
do we
if you
wanna
just said
say-
if you just said proof of the applicant's ownership of the boat. And
Well,
a,
what was-
and a copy of current registration if necessary,
If required.
if required, would clean up that and satisfy Peter. Or the Peters of the community.
If required. So I wonder if documentation is optional either way, so it's just registration if required.
Well, you can either document your boat or register your boat.
That what it says?
Well, that's, yeah, I mean.
That's what I've always understood.
No, if
Right,
it's
right.
documented, you still have to register it if it's powered in New York.
You
can look
about tax money.
Why don't you Google that too while you're at it? I'm gonna
Yeah, Google that.
No.
I mean, as long as I can remember, if you were documented, you didn't have to register. You didn't have to have
Me
numbers.
too. It was Peter Vilder who pointed it out to me, and I pushed back and he said, well, at your peril. But anyway, we are at
Three.
we are at 3. Each applicant shall have is 53
B3.
7B3. Each applicant shall, okay, this is all the same language basically, so domiciled, it's changed. Town Shelter Island applicants ownership of boat function, current registration if necessary, if required.
Okay, the Google search says recreational vessels documented by the US Coast Guard must be registered. However, commercial vessels documented by the US Coast Guard are exempt from registration. I
There
mean,
you go.
that's, you know, I mean, but that's, you know.
You're gonna get their tax money one way or the other.
53.8, thank you. So no person shall live or reside on a boat docked, secured, or moored at any town-owned pier, blah, blah, blah. I just had, live or reside. I don't know what point you become, especially now, since we're changing domiciliary. I don't know what point you are considered residing. A day, 2, 3, 4.
Person shall live.
So I just put in not defined, and then we should think about a period of time. This is
Overnight.
this is where all the different time periods come up.
The old code was, there was no overnight stays, correct?
I don't know what the old one said.
No,
Where are we?
53.8.
3.8A.
So basically, under this,
53.8A, no person shall live or reside on a boat docked, secured or moored at any town-owned dock, pier, wharf, bulkhead, or similar facility within the town. It doesn't specify a time.
exactly, that's the problem. So
So why don't you say overnight?
Overnight.
Yeah,
Overnight
overnight stay.
overnight is,
so we're not going to permit people to be overnight on a town-owned dock.
right. Well, most of
Okay.
them have either a 10-minute to a 2-hour time limit, so certainly not overnight.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting, because we've got 10 minutes, we've got 2 hours, and then you can't live with it. Okay, so,
Right, so.
So-
It's almost
Big dogs,
redundant. It is almost redundant then, yeah.
There's,
so no person shall overnight.
Except of course, right, I mean, town dock where you can You could rent it for a couple of months. I mean, you got that one.
No person or any harbor master or duly authorized individual shall moor. Okay, so Grace's Lane. Except that during a summer season. So there were a bunch of questions on this one. So I'm going to go back to resident here as well. The other change was the size of the boat from 25 to 35 feet. And then the other question was, why is it just scallop fishing, right? That was, yeah.
I'd like
Oh,
to
this is on
comment
B.
on the scallop fishing part. That is probably something that should be left in there, because obviously scallopers need access. Now, whether or not that's by special permit as opposed to just a free-for-all, I believe that it should be something there so that it's not a free-for-all.
What do you mean by free for all?
Well, right now, you don't have to go get a permit or
You
anything.
just go because I'm a scalloper, I can go there.
Yeah, I'm not.
Or I have some scallops and there's some oysters on the boat too, but.
Maybe I should, but I believe that maybe there might be some sort of permitting process for those that wish to utilize that facility during scallop season. That way it's not, like I said, a free-for-all.
Well, the fact that now, I mean, that this situation has changed dramatically in the last year or two, or a couple of years, and that there's two facilities there. There's a town dock or town landing, and then there's a town-owned and county-owned park, essentially. And, you know, I would think that should, in a sense, be a free, not a free-for-all, but I mean, it should entitle people to utilize it. If you want to go in there and have a little picnic out on the, you know, there's picnic benches out there, it's a
I
bulkhead.
think you can tie up there for 2 hours,
Yeah, no, there is 2-hour tie-up there.
you know, or use a floating dock
I
there.
think that what we're talking about
Right,
is during.
it's during scallop season.
It's
I think,
an actual berth there.
I think it might be good to get a permit for, you know, like
I
any
think that
commercial
would be-
fisherman type
Yeah.
person and, you know, have it a duration that's predetermined.
Yeah, well, I had a little bit of thought on this also after seeing the question mark that you put there with the scalp thing. I think that this probably needs a little bit of work, and would fall under something that I would like in the future to address the what I'm looking for, the usability and user friendliness of our town assets. I'd like to address that later. But basically, my notes on this were, I think it needs work, a little bit of talking about. There should be some sort of commercial permit required to establish the fact that you are a
Commercial fisherman.
Permits by town clerk perhaps issued. The need for slips for commercial harvesters, wild caught harvesters, are needed on this side of the island. Specifically, what I was thinking was the breakdown and the setup of fish traps located on that side of the island by a couple of our local baymen. And after talking to just one of these, he was under the impression that it would be a great help to be able to utilize a slip there until along the same lines as what's happening at Deer Harbor's town dock, that commercial slip, for time frame wise.
In perpetuity.
Well, if you apply for the permit, you know, there's a lottery set up for multiple applications on, you know, because it's a limited space. Just something I wanted to throw out there for discussion. That's why I said maybe this particular section needs a little bit of work and.
All right, why don't you work on it?
Okay, I will, because I only had a chance to talk to one bayman who this would benefit, and there's probably maybe 2 more benefit that this could benefit. I'd like to have their input a little bit.
Yeah, I think the whole,
I mean, this applies to any commercial fisherman, right? I mean,
Well, as of right now, I believe it's just for scholars. So
Right,
this would
I'm
be-
just saying, I mean, well, there'll be certain parties that would say, why, I'm oystering.
Well, the reason that I brought this up, and I actually used this term, I created this commercial wild caught seafood harvesters as a designation.
Put some of the farmed oysters. down, is that what-
Well, I thought domiciliary was specific.
It actually, well, it does, it designates a commercial wild caught harvester from an apiculturist. And now that, I don't know how much of a can of worms that opens.
It could be a big one.
That's a term that I use to designate
Well,
different types of baymen.
yeah, and that's,
It's a can of worms.
well, I don't know if it's a can of worms, it's a much larger conversation. And it would be really interesting to have that. But if you can kick this around, I don't know that concept could really fly, because I don't know that the differences can be.
Either, yeah.
But as far as dealing with this provision and the use of this facility, if you can just give me some more ideas, and then we'll put something together.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
So 53.8C. This is the town-owned dock at Daniel Lord. For some reason, this is 10, this is basically because you're launching your boat there, right?
Right.
Just about launching.
So one at Grace's Lane, you're loading, unloading and all this, whereas this, you're just launching your boat, tying it up for 10 minutes and you're getting out of there, right?
Right.
And Matt's question was whether this had been, this provision had been considered since the new facility at Daniel. I think that's what it's all about. That facility.
Right. Yeah. Right, but Bill, C was put in there when the dock was built.
Right.
We had community members came to us and asked for a dock to be built, and we said, yes, we'll do it. After obviously a lot of deliberation, but we said that it's not going to be a place for people to tie up. It's going to be a place for people to launch and go, and that's where that came from.
So
it has-
basically, as it
yes,
stands,
has
it's
been
exactly
approved.
that. Do you utilize this at all? This is really for
Daniel Lord
recreation.
Road?
Yeah.
The dock, the western side of the dock is for launching because of the boat ramp there, 10-minute tie-up. The other side, I believe, is a 10-minute tie-up as well for unloading and loading purposes, I believe.
Right.
I don't see any problems there. I think that is fine. It's used just that way as of now.
Okay, so we should just leave it just as it is.
Yeah, I think, I
Yep.
don't see any problems.
Okay, D, I added, this is, speaking of Peter, no person or entity other than those authorized by Camp Quinnipiac shall moor or secure a boat on the town-owned dock located at the west end of Crescent Beach. I didn't even know that was a town dock, but there's a town-owned dock at the west end of Crescent Beach. Apparently, Camp Quinnipiac has some lease on or use of or exclusive arrangement. I don't know what it is, but I just stuck it in
Only
here.
in the middle of the town landing. No big deal.
That kind of brings up a lot of questions on that.
I can't let it go. Sorry.
Who's maintaining?
Bill,
Bill,
I think they have a lease on it from the town. You should check with
They
our
do.
attorney.
Okay.
They do have a lease.
All right, so if they have a lease, then, as I think you were pointing out, if it shouldn't probably be limited to Camp Quinnipiac. If we're going to codify this, we should say whoever, is authorized or to utilize that dock, because it might,
authorization by the lease, you mean?
well, yeah, there might be another lessee, next year. I don't know. I don't know how long the lease is. I doubt if it runs in perpetuity. So no person or agent otherwise.
Loading docks.
I'd like to actually see what's actually written regarding this at some point, if You can pull this.
No, it's a lease, it's like $1 a year.
Yeah, but there's also other things. Who's maintaining the dock? What's actually allowed to be there? All those.
Well, I mean, there's the floating docks that appeared there.
Yeah, they've appeared. Yeah, that's an issue that should be investigated.
But for now, it's just, you know,
Floating docks seem to just materialize out of nowhere. It's like, interesting how that.
so I think just to cover more than just Camp Quinnipiac, it should read something like no person or entity other than those authorized by the current lessee shall moor or keep a boat at that spot. Let's see, we are going, one way or another, we're going to get through this. No person or entity other than, okay. E, acceptance of a permit shall constitute an agreement. What was the original? Oh, became,
That's a pretty good thing to put in there.
so. Oh, okay, I did this throughout. This is just cleaning up the hold harmless language. It was written 3 or 4 different ways in this chapter 53. So this just, every attorney I've ever met has a slightly different way to write a hold harmless. But this one that was in there is a little sloppy. So anyway, that's my version. We'll see what, I'm sure Stephen might have another. That's all that is. And then the last paragraph just is the same that was there before. 53.9.1 is just putting together 2 provisions that overlapped. This was permit issuance and terms, and the whole paragraph on responsibilities once you had a permit. I'm not sure why that was put together that way, but just trying to clean that up. The first part, A, all applicants for permits shall be subject to a public hearing, except that applications for repair, replacement, or applications to repair, replace, or reconstruct any devices or structures included in this article shall be granted or denied by the town board without a public hearing. That's not what happens now. This is not what, happens in practice. People make applications to repair, replace, or reconstruct the dock or whatever, bulkhead.
A public hearing.
And they come to the clerk, and the clerk passes them on to us. So at least there may not be a public hearing, but there is, at least goes through Waterways. So my thought about how to address this is that to change the language that except that all applications for permits shall be subject to a public hearing, except that applications to repair in kind and in place of conforming docks or structures and devices may be granted or denied by the town board without a public hearing. Just, it gives them the latitude to do whatever they want, but at least reflects what's happening in practice at the time.
Oh, if it's a non-conforming dock and you're replacing in kind in place, wouldn't that be the same thing? I mean, whether it's conforming or not.
Well, this is repair.
They're not changing it.
Limited to repair. Right. And that's what I wanted to limit it to just repair.
That's what it says, but
Yeah.
conforming or non-conforming is what I guess you would say there. For all docks.
That's basically the way it reads now. Applications to repair, replace, or reconstruct any devices or structures included in this article. without a public hearing.
Right, it's just that,
Reconstruct maybe gets.
You know, we've always said you can reconstruct a pre-existing non-conforming as long as you don't change it. So why?
that's addressed in a different part. This is all about whether there's a public hearing or not, and whether it goes, basically it says they shall be granted or denied by the town board without a public hearing. That's the operative language that's not in practice currently. And I think just by putting the may in there, as opposed to shall, provides for the fact that there might be a public hearing.
Okay.
And it basically could, conforming or non-conforming.
So like if they have a question, they'll come to us, basically.
Right.
Well, they have the option to come to us if there's a question. Something doesn't make sense, something doesn't smell right, and that's fine, right?
Yep. Okay. The addition upon the issuance of permits. Right, this is just adding a language, just that, they're gonna have a permit requires that you have a DEC and an Army Corps of Engineers paperwork. That's always been the practice anyway.
Well, practice we've always acted on as long as they had a DEC permit. And we really haven't waited for the Army Corps to act. And that is a change. I don't know.
Well, I think we want to have Army Corps of Engineer letter of permission before anything gets done.
Yeah, I understand that. I just know politically what's happened.
Sometimes it doesn't get done very quick. I mean, it's even
It's not only
slower
this,
than
yeah, I mean, there's been times when they just were like missing in action.
the DEC, which is.
Well, they're firing in the letters of continuation are coming
Yeah,
in
the coordination. letters.
based on every
Yeah,
application.
right now they're present, but
Okay.
there's times when they haven't been.
Let's see, validity. Acceptance of permits. Okay, so few things. This is again cleaning up the hold harmless language, indemnifying and holding the town harmless, and it's expanding from not only the acceptance of the permit, because as Matt pointed out, you get a permit and the permit expires or runs out. Beyond the permit, when you have the dock, when the permit's completed, then you've got a certificate of completion. So that those two documents, the permit while you're building and the certificate of completion when you're done, constitute the agreement between the owner, applicant, and any subsequent owner. That's an addition that they'll indemnify, blah, blah, blah.
Be that E, section E you're talking about?
That is E.
Okay.
Letter F was crossed out by mistake. That's still there.
Well, I wanted to go back up to, where was it? Here, just before E, D.
Would be D.
Yeah. Sure, I got my, right, D, check over this page, yeah, public safety protection of waterways, and not to obstruct any rights of the public as may exist to the use you have stricken underwater lands. There, and changed it to town waters and that such responsibilities survive expiration of the permit.
Yeah, that was actually,
The underwater lands are very important to protect the access to those, so I don't think that should be strict. Underwater lands as well as waterways.
I don't think it's doing that, is it?
In this copy, it's got a blue line.
yeah, no, it's crossed out, and this was actually Matt.
Oh, Matt was blue and you were red?
Well, you know what, we were for a while, and then it disappeared. It really made life easier when we were blue and red, but and I don't know what happened.
I think,
Uh,
I think that was to include the town, sort of underwater land should be included in town waters. And then town waters includes that all waters and land below the mean high water mark over which the town of Shelter Island has jurisdiction.
So it doesn't, it's basically, it's included in the definition of town waters.
Yes,
Oh, it's in the definitions.
It's just that in town waters, it should, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that the intent is that town waters includes the waters and the land below the waters. And so that would get that, but if it doesn't, then.
Yeah, I guess that would go back to definitions, which you don't want to backtrack.
No, it's in there.
It's in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't change that. That was part of the original definition of town waters.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
Town waters, all waters and land below the mean high water mark over which the town of Shelter Island has jurisdiction.
There it is. Great.
So that was so now we're up to G. Okay, this is just, that basically, once again, that person over at the building department, or whoever else is authorized, goes and determines that, the dock was built according to the plans, design and the survey. H, again, just adding certificate of completion in with permit. I,
On H, back up real quick. What is the purpose, this is an honest question, what is the purpose of shall convey non-exclusive right to the use of public bottomland? I don't understand why that's in there. Anybody that is a resident and or domicile of Shelter Island Town has a non-exclusive right to the bottomlands.
I think for the purpose of,
planting a structure there.
right.
Dock. I think
It means specifically that you're putting a dock on that.
Okay, so that doesn't cover any other,
So it's basically that you've got the right to put the dock there, but it's not exclusive to you. In other words, you can climb under the dock and grab
That's
shelter.
As many oysters or whatever you want.
no, I was just curious as to why that was put in there, because I think that everybody has the same right. But it was there to allow the right of the dock itself.
I, as I indicated, was stricken here and then made part of, let's see, this was originally part of, yeah, that should be stricken as duplication. And that's why there's two I's, because that one doesn't belong there. Dock inspector language has not changed. J is an addition, it's a notice requirement that has not been part of the code in the past. Basically putting neighbors on notice that there is an application for a dock. It's basically the same language used in other parts of the code. It's,
That's what they were complaining about down at Silver Beach, about the
no one,
docks, not Prager, but not the dock before that.
right?
No, that makes sense. You should notify before a public hearing, yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think so. It just adds another layer. It's not like the person's asking for a variance. They're asking for something that's within the code. And it's just way beyond what's necessary.
You don't think it's necessary for neighbors to be notified of the fact that there's going to be a barge and heavy construction equipment and everything else on the property next door, and that this disturbance is going to go on for a while? And what the heck is going on my neighbor's property? They don't think they're entitled to that, or to have the opportunity to question whether it's valid or they have a permit or any
If
of
they have
that?
a permit, they have a permit. If they have a permit, they have a permit. I can't see it. I'm sorry. I've been through most of these processes, including the zoning board of appeals. And it becomes onerous.
But you don't think it's as far as transparency and just notifying individuals what's going on in the property next door and having.
People that are
opportunity.
interested, it comes up for town board hearings. You know, I mean, if you're interested and you want to know what's going on, you pay attention to it.
You're in Italy for the summer and the guy next door, is going to build something. You don't want to,
If he's meeting the code and he applies for something, why does he have to advertise it?
Public hearing without notice is meaningless.
Yeah.
yeah. It's,
But
it's,
if he's not asking for a variance, why does he have to, why would you want to add that? I don't see it.
I mean,
Is this-
public
is-
hearings
is-
by definition are noticed. Everybody has the right.
Right.
You're asking for something, you're asking
Is
for
this-
something that requires a public hearing, so therefore.
So, I mean-
public notice should be.
A public notice says there's a hearing on site, yada, 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 whatever it is.
Is
I
this
mean, yeah, it's
is this
incumbent on you to pay attention to it, I
So you need
guess.
to be paying attention to what your neighbors are doing at all times. I mean, I think it's onerous.
Well,
Reverse,
it
be
could
like,
be either way, like you
it's
could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think most
Notice is not a
people,
big deal.
right, most people are going to tell their neighbors.
Yeah.
People that
What
don't-
happens to one of
In
the,
this day and age, I don't think that's the case anymore. Unfortunately, I believe that a lot of neighbors don't talk to each other the way that we used to.
I don't think it's a giant
I don't think it's a giant request to.
You know,
I don't think it's a big
decision
deal.
on anybody. I mean,
if
for the
you-
most part, if you have good relations with your neighbors, I mean, yeah, there might be the time when you don't get along with your neighbor and he's going to try to do everything he can to make your life miserable.
Right.
Maybe.
That never happens.
excuse me,
If you're gonna have,
don't you need to notify your neighbor if you're building a house that there's a hearing and everything?
No, because,
No, only if it's-
generally you get a building permit if there's no problem with setbacks or anything like that. It's not a hearing issue.
Only if it's
I mean,
you're asking for.
if
a
you're
variance.
asking for some relief, then it is.
This is only requiring notice if there's a public hearing. It's not requiring notice if there's no public hearing. So if there's no public hearing, there's no issue, then there's no notice.
Yeah, but there's a public hearing on almost every dock, right? Because if you,
Well, why would, so think that backwards, why would there be a public hearing on a dock? If there's going to be a public hearing, if one's required, then people should be notified of it. It shouldn't be an issue.
no, I'm not arguing hardcore against this. I'm just saying, it's different than building a house. Because every dock gets a public hearing.
That's because it's on public property.
right, that's because it's on public
Okay.
property. That's true.
There you go.
So yeah, public notice should go out.
Right, we'll leave that in. 13 is a good one because it's stricken. We don't have to go over it. It's been moved someplace else. 15.
Because there's a lot of red there.
And that's a lot of red there, and it's all across.
Okay, 15, so, this is it, okay, good, this is interesting stuff. Article 4. So this is water-related structures. So, just expand it a little bit beyond, just clarified language, use same language that's used in other places, alter and modify. Other types of structures, such as splashboards and wave curtains. Wave curtain I never heard of until I started researching what splashboards are.
Are they the same?
Yeah, pretty much. Let's see, other water related, so this is one thing I crossed out and I might have to be put back in is, blind. No person shall construct blah, 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 building pier. Any part of which is embedded in or attached to the land above or below water So when you look at the list of things that are here, it's, includes buildings, piers, all sorts of things. And I was just thinking, look, a building above water, what does that got to do with what we're dealing with? These are really structures that are above and below water. If it's above water, it's got to be also below water. So I really don't know how to clean that language up and make it any clearer other than just to leave above or below back in again. That was just sort of language.
Cantilever.
Well,
Yeah.
there are houses that are on piers above water on the island, or at least one. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it can hurt to leave it in there. It would be a question of whose jurisdiction is it. We be involved in it. If we weren't, then we just step back and building department take care of it. Let's see, for sure. Dredging, just so this portion of it, I think it's just cleanup language. It doesn't change any policy or anything. The next portion, existing, and the numbers all change, so it makes it even a little more confusing, but so this section, 53, what was 5317, someone just took the same language out of 5312 and just dropped it in here. 5312
And this is the same?
applies, 5312 has the language in it that the following are exempt from basically the design requirements of 5311, which describes it, all the ways that all the design criteria for docks. For water-related structures, there are no design criteria for these things. So there's really no design criteria to be exempted from. So even if you put the preamble language that's missing from this, if you just read the original 5317, you scratch your head and say, what are they talking about? It just all by itself doesn't make any sense. It's out of the blue. It says any water control structure in existence prior to the adoption of this chapter that is maintained in kind and in place. What about it?
It's not, it's like a,
So it's not.
Doesn't make any sense. So this, again, because this new category of water control structure was created, the language was just copied from 5312 and put in here. It really has no application to 53, what was 16 and what is now 15. So that's why I have in there to strike the whole thing.
That's no problem.
Then limitations on water-related structures on fresh water. A slightly similar situation, just striking the language about non-conforming. There's nothing to conform to,
right.
so it's really just dealing with non-permitted. And then you do get into, what if they're pre-existing? I changed, said repaired or replaced, but I think repaired or maintained. If it's going to be replaced, I think we want it to, that would fall under being altered or modified, where you want to reduce. And again, it's not going to reduce its nonconformity. You're going to reduce its size and environmental impact. It's and then under replacing something that was destroyed, instead of 30%, I'd increase it to 50%. Just, both of those being a little more restrictive as far as maintaining these things in fresh water.
Yeah, in kind and in place, you have and you have or struck out. I would kind of prefer to see the or in and the and out.
Which one are you, where are you?
Very, number 3
Three.
down at the end, near the last sentence.
Any structure deteriorating, damaged, destroyed, any cause of God, blah, blah, blah.
As in kind.
Usable and shall be permitted to remain so long as the repairs are in kind.
And in place.
Yeah,
And-
and in place.
But the next line should say, I would prefer to see it say, or are determined by the town board to significantly reduce the size of yada, yada, yada.
Okay, every place else that we have this language in the code,
Mhm.
it reads as I changed it here. It says, as the repairs are in kind and in place and are determined by the town board to significantly reduce their, pre-existing nonconformity. So that
It's not an or, either or, it's just.
it's an and.
It's intentionally.
Yeah.
So this just makes it, conform to every other use of that language in the current code, which basically, the whole thrust of that is that if it's non-conforming, the goal is to make it less non-conforming.
I don't know. What I'm reading, it just says or in what was prior, 5317.
Yeah, it was
Are in
or,
kind to,
but,
kind to replace or in place or are determined by the town board is what was.
right, I know
Uh,
that. But in other sections of the code where we're addressing nonconformity, we're requiring that it be in kind and in place and determined by the town board to reduce the nonconformity. So, and that makes sense. I mean, that's the goal, is to reduce nonconformity.
Okay, I'd like to just go back to Jay for a second. The public hearing. Is there a public hearing held when you do a repair on a dock or a structure or dredging? And, for those things, I mean, do you have to notify? I just, my question, I could understand if you're putting in a new structure that wasn't there before. Yeah, I could understand you saying, okay, we should notify the neighbors and they should get a chance to, say, I don't like it, I don't want to see it. And even though it meets the code, you want to raise that specter. But what about, if you're doing a repair, those things, I believe, I could be wrong, I don't know. And I think we need to look
Really-
into that before you add another layer of things that people need to go through to maintain their property, to deal with their stuff.
But most of the time, if it's in kind and in place, I don't think you do need a public hearing, right?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I'd like to,
May.
I think that's something that needs to be.
It's the whole thing where it says shall be without a public hearing, just the town board issues, right? That's what we talked about in,
Yeah.
so we're changing it to May.
Yeah, so there may not be a public hearing required, so there may not be required to do a notice. This is if a public hearing is required.
I guess what I'm asking is a public hearing required for maintenance and for repairs?
I don't think so.
Well, I think that's only a percent. Yeah, the threshold, if the threshold isn't met, then you don't need a public hearing. But if it goes over the threshold, then you do require a public hearing.
Okay, did
So
you hear
if
that?
No, I didn't know if the threshold is, right now it's $10,000 worth of repair. If it's over that, you need a public hearing?
You so.
Hold on.
Permit, and therefore, because you need the permit, then you need then appear for the public hearing.
The public hearing is actually triggered by the need for a permit versus an amount of repair work to be done.
Let's see.
I know the threshold right now is 10 grand. I mean, that I know.
Mhm.
So the question is it over that requires a public hearing?
Well, it's over
And
that
if that's the
requires
case,
a
then I think that
permit, right?
becomes onerous
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
person.
So it's
I don't,
over $10,000 requires a permit, and then the permit requires a public hearing. So that anything under $10,000 doesn't require a public hearing because there's no permit required.
Permit, okay.
Yeah.
So my point being, all right, if all you're trying to do is repair your dock,
Mhm.
all right, and you know, I mean, a couple of pilings or even just top decking can certainly
Be more than
reach
10.
the 10 grand, which we're
Mhm.
also looking to change anyway, but you know, to make it more.
Say maybe it would behoove us to change the
yeah,
10
no,
grand number to
Right,
more reflect
right. Well, I
current
did,
cost.
I did propose that, and I sent it all to you in a draft that I hope we're gonna address at the next meeting. But still, I don't think,
it needs to be nuanced. I know what you're saying, and it makes sense. Well, in a repair and maintenance situation, to not require a hearing and notice.
notification of your neighbors, that's, yeah.
The other, on the fee part, as far as a permit, well, we'll talk about that next week, but that's, okay, let's see. At least into the. All right, let me play around with that.
Thank you. Really, I think that behooves everybody. I gotta compliment you guys that did all this, because there's a lot that went into it, and I think it's nice to see the stuff getting cleaned up.
Yeah, this is
And I appreciate you
unfortunately
listening.
only a small part of it.
Right. And
So next week, we'll figure out, put together some other sections to look at. But yeah, we want to talk about fees and,
I would like to actually perhaps address 5314.1 if we can discuss that next time as well. That regards storage of floats. This has been an ongoing problem I've tried to deal with for decades. I'd like to discuss that issue next time if possible.
We'll sort of get to it, won't we?
we'll get
Yeah,
to
that's
it.
what I
We'll get
thought,
to it.
yeah,
Let's,
okay.
let's,
We roll and probably cherry pick.
I don't want to try and change your course of doing things.
good. But I don't think that we've made any changes on 14.1, so can you just shoot me thoughts on 14.1?
Yeah, I'll do that, yeah.
All right. Good, that's pretty good. We came within 10 minutes of when I thought we. That's all I got. Anyone else have anything?
yeah, no.
Excuse me, what time is next week's meeting?
5 o'clock on Monday, the 11th.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the little piece was on Dickinson Creek, changing that from a 25-foot boat to a 35-foot. I think it needs to be looked at again, thought about again. I don't even know
Okay,
if
the reason I believe that was a request from me, and the reason being is because the current vessels that are using it and will be using it from a Bayman's point of view, and also from mooring contractors' point of view that will be using that, the vessel size is considerably larger than 26 feet, which I believe 26 is what's there now. That's why I put the increase in size limit there.
Yeah, I mean, 35 would put, you know, I just remember my 35 Bertram with twin screws and just even, I think that's like an oversized thing that should
Well, you
really.
should also consider the fact that decades ago, the Contessa used to tie up in there as well.
I'm well aware of that.
Yep.
I do remember.
So I believe that a 30-foot boat is not too large.
So this is a 2-hour tie-up. I mean, what is the concern is that there's not enough room or what's the?
Turning it around, I don't think the channel is 30 feet wide.
So the getting in and out of Dickinson Creek is restricted.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get in and out of there.
Yeah.
Being at high tide. Well, no, that's not true. That's true.
At low tide,
You can get in there up to,
There's 6 feet of water there.
way down Tarkettle Road. Not very far at low tide,
Low tide, yeah.
but
You get to the end of the bulkhead.
We're
Oh,
talking
that's-
about Dickinson Creek, not.
Right.
Yeah, Dickinson Creek,
Yeah,
yeah.
under the bulkhead, you can get to the dock where the police boat is.
Yep.
That's it.
So Al, you think you can't really spin?
I don't think so. I don't know.
I think
I think you,
it
think it's
depends on the
debatable.
tide. I mean, it depends
would
on the
feel
tide,
comfortable
but you're gonna
under
be
my
kicking
30-foot
mud up at a
houseboat
good
around it,
percentage
yeah.
of tides.
So what,
I mean, I don't know what other operators feel comfortable doing, but I would feel comfortable turning a 34-foot my boat around in there.
so is it environmental concern for Dickinson Creek or what's driving your concern? What?
Yeah, that's part of it. I think a major part of it.
Okay, because currently.
I
there's a
mean,
boat there.
if
yeah, I don't see
especially
very many boats going in there, period.
right. But especially if you were to consider that, as I said, the next, you have one piece that's town-owned dock, and then the next 100-foot of bulkhead is a county park.
Jointly.
Yeah, jointly a town and county park that most likely will be, at some point, is going to be open to the public. And to allow for a 35-foot boat to go in there and tie, even for 2 hours, I think it's a little tough on that channel and that space. And that space has to be continuously dredged. We want it to be continuously dredged.
It is currently.
Right.
Yeah.
And as it fills in, which it does, you could be imperiling, a boat going in or out of there, of that size. Because it's not always 100% clear, and a lot of time, as it narrows, which it does, it's not always maintained at the depth that it is, right after it's been dredged.
And as difficult as it would be to enforce, does it make sense to address this in terms of draft as opposed to length of boat?
That's what I was saying.
That might be something to consider.
Right.
Yeah.
So give us a number that works.
Okay, we'll see.
2.5 feet.
See what there was one specific application for a specific person that I've seen use this before, and that's why I put that size limit in there, because the boat is considerably larger than what's allowed there. Now, that's why this has come up. But I think the draft is something to be considered maybe versus size limit.
Mm-hmm.
Because the draft, it really makes a mess of
Yeah,
it.
that is what makes the mess. You're right, yeah. So maybe that is something to consider. I will check and see what the depths of people's boats are.
All right. Is that it?
I think
Motion to
it is.
adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Having this extra meeting, this is what we need.
Yeah, well.